many people are scared of baking sourdough. They say it's a whole kerfuffle, it takes so much time. Yes, they're right, it does take a lot of time, but it's very, very forgiving to make sourdough, and it's really easy once you get going to it and you've done it a few times and you understand how it works. So the sourdough is very flexible to fit into your daily routine basically. You don't have to treat it like a baby, but sometimes you have to feed it a little bit. Right, so now it's time to make our bread. So I'm using 300 grams of the white, 100 each of the corazon and the rye, and about 180 to 200 grams of my yeast. Put it all in a bowl. In my case, I will put it in my machine and it will do the mixing for me, or you could just use it by doing this stretch and tear method like you would do normal bread. So yesterday we started off our starter by adding 1 tablespoon of this flour, bread flour, and 1 tablespoon of my boiled water, cold boiled water. So I'm just going to keep doing that again. So this is day 2, spoonful, whisk it all together. Job done. Going to cover it, leave it till tomorrow morning. Do this again for 7 days, and then you will have your proper starter to bake your sourdough. So you must remember there are factors that can influence your bread making at home. Kitchen temperature is definitely something that can influence the result of your bread. The types of flour you use definitely will make a difference as well, but that is where your experience comes in, by looking at your dough and actually the feel of the dough, and also the type of water that you use. I've said so many times now that I just use tap water that I boil and I store it in a container. So that is the thing. The 3 factors that you have to look out for is the temperature, the flours, different flours you may use, and the water. So before I bake, I always do the floating test. So I just take some of the starter and put it in water, and if it floats nicely like it does there, you know it's full of air and it's ready, so your bread will be good and happy to create nice big bubbles in the bread for you later. So here's my dough. It had the yeast, the water, the flours, and all of the salt, and I'm going to laminate this now. I'm going to show you what a wonderful process that is. Some people like to use flour on the work surface. I just like to use water, and I wet my hands, and now stretch this dough. So you stretch this, you incorporate air bubbles, you're stretching the gluten quite heavily, but you don't want to overstretch it. As soon as it will tear, you have to stop, and then you just fold it in. And now we will let it proof again for 30 minutes. Put that back in my bowl. Always cover it, it stops it from drying out. Right, so my dough was resting for an hour, but look at those air bubbles. Just from all that laminating I did earlier, it has created all that lovely air bubbles. So I'm going to show you the slap and fold method. And I forgot to tell you earlier, I use a little bit of olive oil to just rub it into my bowl so that it just slides out nicely. Oh yeah. You can feel by stretching it how the dough becomes firmer. So this is slap and stretch over. Before I put my dough into the banneton, I am going to make sure that it doesn't stick. I use rice flour. This is important. I don't use bread flour. I use rice flour. I find that it is just so much easier to work with. And then, because I like the seeds, I've got some pre-mixed seeds here, and I'm just going to put some of that. I like it a lot, so lots. So now my banneton is ready, and I'm just going to put a little bit of flour on the table. So I'm just bringing it all together into a round ball, and I'm going to put it straight into my banneton there. And now it's important to actually remember to do a bit of stitching. So my fingers are sticky, and the stitching makes the dough nice and taut. There you go. And then a little bit of rice flour on top. And if you have time, you can leave it now on the work surface for half an hour, and it will sort of rises or proofs maybe by 20–30%. And then once that has happened, you can put it straight into your bag. If you haven't got the time, if you do this before it's bedtime, like I do mostly, put that in there, fold it over, give it a nice dome, and then straight into the fridge. So I'm very excited about this little blade that I've got here. So it's a razor blade actually, but I had this made in South Africa from beautiful oak wood, and it's very cleverly done. The man has put magnets on the inside, so my blade is nice and stable, and I just put it together like that, and there's my blade to cut my dough, which I'm going to do very, very shortly. So my bread has had all night now. I like to have it at least there for a good 12 hours in the fridge. I had loads of time to do very slow fermentation. You can see it's a lovely, wet, wobbly dough with beautiful big air bubbles everywhere. And I'm just making sure it's not sticking to the banneton before I turn this out onto the paper. Oh, look at that lovely big air bubbles there. Let's hope the whole bread is full of them. Okay, it's time to turn this out and do the scoring. Beautiful, soft. Look at all the lovely ridges that the banneton has created. Okay, time for the scoring. So here's my little knife, and I'm just going to go right across and down there. You can score any way you like. You can cut it any way you like, but I prefer to have it like this because it then will look as if the seeds are made in the, as if the seed should be in the middle of the bread. There's just one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spray it with a little bit of water now. Like that. Ready to go in the oven. Okay, my oven was at 250 degrees, and I'm going to just, so this is really red hot, and I'm going to just move that straight onto there. You may think, why are the ice blocks here? Well, they're here to help create steam. You can see the steam coming from there, and also I have a container of water that I'm going to put at the bottom of the oven first. And now it's time for the loaf to go in. So I love eating sourdough bread. I love the flavors of it, and I love the crunchiness of the outer layer of the bread, the good crunch when you cut through it, bite into it, and then the really softness with the great big holes that awaits for us. And I love it when I can toast it. And I always want to have my own homemade jam on it, but the bread tastes so good that most of the time I just eat it with butter. Right, so this is out of the oven, and it's time to, oh yeah. Listen to that. I'm delighted. I think it's time we cut this bread.